Okay, let's dive straight into this one. Have you ever seen something online, maybe just a picture or a clip? Seems kind of sweet, right?
Uh-huh. Pretty innocent on the surface.
Yeah, and then you look at the comments and it's just a complete war zone.
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
Well, that's exactly what went down with this clip from an anime movie, Josie the Tiger and the Fish.
Right.
A post with a montage basically showing a relationship from the film. It went viral. And like completely out of the blue, it kicked off this huge, really intense debate about, get this, the average male fantasy.
And for this deep dive, we're looking at a YouTube video as our main source. It really zooms in on this specific moment.
What?
It breaks down the flood of Twitter reactions that came after. And importantly, the creator actually watched the anime too, to really get a handle on what was going on from all sides.
That makes sense. So our mission today is basically to unpack why. Why did this specific image set off such like polar opposite and honestly furious reactions?
What was it about that clip?
We'll explore those conflicting views based on our source, naturally. And I think crucially, dig into what the source itself suggests this average male fantasy thing might actually be about, looking at their analysis.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So the spark, the image that kind of lit the fuse,
Yeah.
it was this montage from Josie the Tiger and the Fish.
Right.
The movie's about a college student takes a part-time job as a caretaker for a young woman, Josie, who uses a wheelchair.
Okay.
And, over the course of the story, their relationship develops and they fall in love. Seems straightforward enough.
Yeah, and our source points out that the initial reaction to the post was pretty positive from one group. A lot of men were in the replies, expressing this real sense of, like, yearning, wishing they had a relationship like the one shown.
So they saw something desirable there.
Exactly, and they were calling it pretty simply the average male fantasy.
Okay, and then came the outrage. Yeah. Our source lays out how this sort of hopeful take was just immediately slammed with super strong negative reactions. Mostly, it seems, from women reacting to that specific phrase, average male fantasy.
And what's really striking here, something the source definitely emphasizes, is how fast it went to the absolute darkest possible interpretation, like 0 to 60.
It really was. They list, a whole bunch of the criticisms and accusations that just flooded the replies.
Yeah, I saw some of that. People instantly labeling it things like a fetish,
Right.
implying it's this unhealthy focus just on the disability itself, or creepy, predatory, unrealistic.
Problematic. All the buzzwords.
All of them. And accusations of like fetishizing a disabled girl specifically to have control over her.
Yeah, the disability was the point of the fantasy because it supposedly makes her dependent.
And a lot of people apparently saw Josie, the female character, through this really negative lens. Like she's just super vulnerable, unrealistically happy all the time.
Someone who only exists to need the man.
Yeah. Even calling her an oosex doll waifu. I mean,
It's pretty intense language.
it really is.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was dismissed by some as just a perverted fantasy.
With claims that the fantasy itself was specifically about having a girlfriend with, and this is a quote they highlighted, no agency who's completely physically dependent on you and forced into blanket subservience and compliance.
Wow. That is an incredibly harsh reading.
It is, and it went further. Accusations that this shows men fetishizing disabled women just so they can abuse them.
Good grief.
And also labeling the whole desire as ableist, saying it discriminates against disabled people.
So.
By suggesting they can't find love normally or that any able-bodied partner must have some creepy motive, and infantilizing them too.
Okay.
Our source even mentioned some of the most extreme comments, like people calling the male character in the anime a rapist.
A rapist.
Maybe.
Based on that montage.
Apparently. Or claiming that the majority of men participate in abuse of disabled people. Just these massive, awful generalizations.
Mm-hmm.
And the source creator expresses like genuine shock in their video that a relationship that looks happy and functional on the surface could be seen so negatively, immediately just written off as fetish content.
That's certainly,
Yeah.
a firestorm of negative assumptions. But this is where the source starts to push back, right? Using the movie itself.
Exactly. They pivot right there and start digging into the actual film to challenge that whole narrative.
How does the film portray Josie then, according to the source?
Well, they make it clear Josie is not just always happy or passive, not at all.
Okay.
She's shown as like boisterous, sassy, really headstrong. Apparently, she has a bit of a foul mouth, too.
Okay.
And she was definitely depressed at the start. The source even uses the term girl failure that was apparently used to describe her initial state in the story.
So completely contradicts that image of the vulnerable, always compliant, ooh, sex doll waifu.
Totally. That reading just doesn't line up with the character described by the source after watching the film.
Interesting. What about the disability itself? Was it romanticized?
No, the source says the movie shows it realistically. It doesn't sugarcoat the challenges or the reality of it. It's just part of her life, not the soul-defining trait or something made artificially appealing.
Got it. And what about the dynamic? Was it just him saving her?
That's another key point the source brings up. It's not the typical trope where, the free spirit fixes the uptight guy or whatever. Here, the male lead already kind of has his shit together, as the source puts it.
Okay, so he's not a project.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And while Josie definitely learns from him and he helps her pursue her dreams, it's shown as a two-way street. He learns from her too. It's about mutual growth, not just one person taking care of another.
That sounds much more balanced.
Right. And the source argues that the sheer negativity of those initial reactions points to maybe a troubling inability for some people to see the humanity in men, or maybe just humanity in general in certain online spaces.
Leading to that darkest, worst faith interpretation you mentioned.
Exactly. Just assuming the absolute worst motives right off the bat.
They mentioned an anecdote too, right? About a disabled woman?
Oh, yeah. This was wild. Apparently, a disabled woman showed the clip to her actual boyfriend.
Okay.
And his response was loving. Something like, I love you because you're you. Disability has nothing to do with it. I would have done that anyway.
Yeah.
Supportive.
Sounds nice.
But someone online, seeing her tweet about this interaction, accused her boyfriend of being a rapist.
Just based on that. Oh my God.
Yeah. The source uses it as this really stark example of how far people were willing to push these negative assumptions, projecting them onto real people.
That's disturbing.
And the source also takes aim at those huge, sweeping claims, like the idea that most men are abusers.
Yeah, that seemed extreme.
They basically say, look, the vast majority of men are just normal guys. Their words were pretty relatable. They wake up, take a shit, get out of bed, take a shower, go to work, come home, and wait for GTA 6.
Huh. Okay, point taken.
Yeah.
Just regular dudes living regular lives.
Pretty much. Not plotting abuse.
And wasn't there a point about the author of the original story?
Yes. This felt really significant, especially with all the talk about misogyny. The source points out the author of the original story that the anime film is based on, Saiko, was a woman.
Oh, okay. That definitely complicates the narrative that it's purely some kind of misogynistic gooner fantasy.
Right. It challenges that idea that the source material itself came from some nefarious male perspective.
So the source really uses the film's details and context to kind of dismantle that initial negative wave of interpretation.
Precisely. They clear the ground, so to speak, to build their own argument about what's really going on with this average male fantasy idea.
Okay, so if the negative reaction was maybe based on misinterpretations or just, worse faith readings, what does the source actually suggest is the core of this fantasy? What were those guys actually yearning for?
Well, connecting it all together, the source argues it starts with something really basic, something human, the desire to love and to be loved.
Okay, universal. Can't argue with that.
But then there's this specifically male aspect, according to their analysis. And that's this deep-seated drive, this desire to be a protector and a provider for the people they care about.
Protector and provider.
Yeah.
Okay. Why that specifically?
The reasoning they offer is pretty interesting. They suggest it comes from this fundamental need men have for purpose and a sense of worth.
Makes sense.
And in the modern world, maybe those traditional avenues for men to tangibly prove themselves or provide, the way maybe their grandfathers did, physical labor, sole breadwinner, that sort of thing. Those aren't always there, or they're less clear-cut.
Right. Society's changed.
But that deep urge, that yearning for that role, for feeling useful and responsible in that way, the source says it's still there. It leaves some men feeling a bit lost, maybe useless sometimes.
Okay, I can see that. So how does this connect back to the anime clip? This is where it gets really interesting.
This is the core of it. The source connects it directly. The male character taking the caretaker job, dedicating himself to helping Josie achieve her dreams. It's not about control in their reading. It's presented as an embodiment of that protector-provider instinct.
Yeah.
Her disability, while real and challenging, creates a very clear, very tangible need that he can meet.
Okay. It gives his actions a visible purpose.
Exactly. It allows him to fulfill that role. And it's framed less about just money and more about things like loyalty, duty, virtue, acts of service, big or small.
Men live for that shit, I think was the quote the source used.
That was the quote, yeah. That feeling of being needed and being able to meet that need through your actions.
They had that analogy about the princess and the dragon too, right?
Yeah, that was a great way to frame it. The source reframes that classic story for modern times. The dragons we fight today aren't literal monsters.
These are everyday obstacles.
Right. And the princesses aren't just royalty waiting in towers. They're people who need a hand. So the heroic acts become, well, kind of mundane, but still meaningful.
Like helping someone reach something on a high shelf.
Exactly. Or lifting a heavy box, opening a tough jar, helping your kid with a Lego set that's driving them crazy.
Or helping a young woman in a wheelchair who just desperately wants to see the ocean.
Precisely. It fits right into that pattern. It's about meeting a need, providing support.
And the source argues the fantasy isn't about the power imbalance then.
No, they argue it's about the man finding that tangible purpose, and crucially, the woman willingly accepting and appreciating that support. That feeling she gives back, maybe unspoken, of, I can depend on you. That's part of the reward.
Okay. They also mentioned something about a male biological clock.
Yeah, not in the fertility sense, obviously, but more like this future-oriented yearning for a warm and happy home.
The family.
A family, yeah. A unit that relies on you, that gives meaning and purpose to all the daily grind, the effort it takes just to get through life.
That provides the why.
Exactly. And the source makes this kind of sad observation, actually.
What's that?
That simply wanting something beautiful and normal, like a loving partner, a family, that sense of belonging and purpose in a relationship, for a lot of guys today, that feels like a fantasy because it seems so complex or hard to achieve.
Wow. Yeah, that hits differently.
It does. And the source also kind of frames this whole blow-up within the larger context of, well, what they call the ongoing, never-ending gender war.
Ah, yes. The internet battleground. How does that fit in?
They suggest that maybe conflicting ideas about femininity are partly fueling the negative reactions.
Like what?
You know, the ideal of the strong, independent woman who doesn't need anyone, that can clash pretty hard with the depiction of a woman who seems to value needing her partner, or at least accepts his support and protection.
So seeing that dependency, even if mutual, as regressive or problematic.
Potentially, yeah. For some people, that ideal clashes. And the source also touches on the online dynamic specifically.
Like how people interact.
Yeah, like the pick-me accusation phenomenon.
Right, where women criticize other women for seemingly seeking male approval or not adhering to certain feminist viewpoints.
Exactly. The source mentions the pressure that can exist in some female social circles, which might be different from the anonymity online, though that has its own issues.
So that pressure might make it harder for women to express views that go against the grain without facing backlash from within their own groups.
That's the idea the source puts forward. It could add fuel to the fire in these kinds of online debates. We're just relaying their commentary on those dynamics, of course.
Understood. Okay, so pulling this all together, what does this all mean? We've basically got these two wildly different takes on a simple anime clip.
Yeah, on one side you have this view steeped in suspicion. It's creepy, it's ableist, it's a fetish about control.
And on the other side, presenting by our source, you have this interpretation rooted in like fundamental human and specifically male yearnings.
Right, a desire to protect, to provide, to find real tangible purpose in a loving relationship.
So it really leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Building on what the source suggests.
It does. This raises an important question. If that desire to protect and provide is a core male drive, like the source argues, what happens? What are the consequences when modern life, for all sorts of reasons, maybe reduces or minimizes the chances for men to actually fulfill that role in concrete, everyday ways?
Yeah, what happens when there's a gap between that deep-seated desire and the actual opportunities in the real world?
And how does that gap maybe shape relationships today? How does it feed into the kind of polarized, sometimes toxic online arguments we see constantly, like the one sparked by this single anime clip?
What happens when a fundamental human need starts to feel like it can only ever be met in a fantasy?
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.